All right. Thank you for those who are with us on this evening. So hope everyone is doing well. We are going to call this meeting to order. I have 6:02 on my clock. So we're going to make sure this is as timely as we can make it. And before we go further with our welcome, I do want to say my script, I found it this time. I'm prepared. So thanks for joining us for the conference meeting. We have a few announcements to make regarding the teleconference meeting. So if the video conference is disconnected at any time during this meeting, the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the audio and video connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored with 15 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be placed on a special agenda via video conference. The agenda and documents are located on okc.gov. Anyone wishing to speak about an agenda item, please text 405-757-4429 and please provide your name, phone number, the item number, and the reason you wish to comment. Speakers will be allowed 2 minutes to comment. I ask that all participants please keep their phones on mute until they are recognized to speak. And committee members will be allowed to ask questions or comment at any time during the meeting. So again, we'll call this meeting to order and we will begin. So I do have a few items on our agenda. First, there is a welcome, item number 2. So I do want to say welcome to everyone. It has been a while, but I promise you it has been worth the wait. So we are just inching away to the finish line. So I will call on our other co-chairs, Dr. Benjamin.
Hey y'all, welcome. Thank you so much. As Councilmember Nice said, I know it's been a long road, but we are so excited to be where we are today, and we do thank you all of y'all for hanging in there with us. But I think what we have here looks really good, and so hopefully we will have a good discussion about it, but we'll be ready to move forward. So welcome.
Thank you. Mariana Adams.
Good evening, everyone. I would just echo saying thank you all for continuing to embark on this journey. And then I want to give a special thank you to the City of Oklahoma City staff who have been very diligent and persevered and really helped bolster kind of keeping this thing moving through legal and administrative support. So we would not be where we are without the City of Oklahoma City's investment, their time, their staff, their resources, and I appreciate that. Do we have, Councilwoman Nice, do we have quorum?
I see 27 and 27 of those are city staff. So that's
What's there? Okay.
21, almost there. So if anyone knows anyone that's a part of this, please ask them to, we got one more coming in. We need at least a couple more. So if you know anyone that hasn't joined the meeting yet, and you know them personally, please reach out so we can make these final considerations amongst us in this meeting, so we won't have to defer them and meet again in order for us to do that. So thank you, ladies, and for our city staff. Yes, thank you again for all of that you continuously do to make sure we get this to the finish line. So we do have item 3. This is discussion, and hopefully you did receive your agenda packet. I know it was a pretty healthy agenda packet for you all to look through. So hopefully if you had time, you were able to do that. And this is going to be where we discuss and have recommendations to the City Council of the draft ordinance to establish a Human Rights Commission in Oklahoma City. And this is with our Policy and Legislation Committee, as well as our city and legal staff. So I'm not sure who would take the lead on this, if it would be our Policy and Legislation, or if we would like to hear from our city staff first. But either way, whoever would take that lead, let's just dig in where we can.
Probably city staff would be best for this.
Thank you. So Miss Rita or Jared or even Mr. Kenny, I'll hand it over to you all.
Okay, good. It helps when you unmute your sound. Let's see. I was going to go over to start with the draft ordinance highlights, number 1, and then number 2, the flow chart that shows the procedure. And Rita or Jared, I counted 39 members listed on the agenda. So if you have 21, I think you have a quorum. Is that right?
We had decided on 23, but I think this is good. I think we have them. We have 23 anyway, so
Okay, great.
I think we're fine.
That sounds good. If you look at the single sheet that talks about the draft ordinance highlights, that doesn't go into all the details that are actually in the ordinance, but it kind of highlights what this draft is. We went with 11 members because I know that the task force, and actually I think the task force was recommending somewhere between 13 and 21, I think is right. So that's probably inaccurate on this sheet. But I do know that there are some council members that wanted 9. And so I picked 11 as kind of a compromise. That way you can have one commissioner from each ward that the mayor would appoint with consultation to the council member in that ward. And then you would have 3 at-large members. So that's why we picked 11 to go with this draft. And I think I haven't heard any naysayers on that from anybody on the council. So I think that probably would pass, I hope. And then the HRC members would serve a term of 3 years, but members initially appointed from even numbered wards would serve an initial term of 2 years. So you'll have some staggering of members. Then, and I missed that on the 3 at-large members, when he appoints those, the mayor would designate one of them as the HRC chair and one as the HRC vice chair. Then if you got in a meeting and neither the chair or the vice chair actually was at that meeting, the commissioners that were there could appoint their own temporary chair for that meeting. So that's how that would work. Then again, the terms would be 3 years for everyone except for the even numbered wards that would serve 2 terms. And no member could serve more than 2 consecutive terms, which was in the policy and legislative committee recommendation. Members would not be eligible for reappointment earlier than 3 years after the completion of their second term. Then the HRC powers that are in the ordinance are essentially copied from Title 25 statutes. But initiation of petitions by HRC would be subject to the consent of the alleged aggrieved party or parties. So in other words, the commission itself could initiate a petition alleging some type of discrimination, but you would need the consent of the alleged aggrieved party. So that's to avoid dragging alleged aggrieved parties in, against their will. So that's what we did on that. Then when the petition is filed, notice would be given to the respondent. Then you'd have a compliance officer who would be part of the administrative service. And a compliance officer would be employed by the city manager. So he would appoint the compliance officer, or potentially it could be an attorney if that's what you wanted. But essentially what we have right now is that the city manager would appoint a compliance officer. And when Rita had the previous Human Rights Commission, she had a compliance officer essentially, or an administrative assistant who was under the city manager, which is ideal. That makes them a city employee and they're under the city manager. So the compliance officer would initially review with the municipal council or attorney and the chair of the HRC or the HRC's alternative designee. So for example, the HRC could designate some committee of its own to get with the compliance officer and the attorney to review the petition. And so the first review would be for possible discretionary referral of an alleged Title 25 violation to the state of Oklahoma. That would be to the Attorney General, or potentially to a federal official or agency or local organization, such as the EEOC or the appropriate federal organization that might have jurisdiction over the matter. So that would be the initial review. If it is not, if the petition alleges a violation of Article 4 of this ordinance, which is hate crimes, that's where you have property damage or personal injury, and it's motivated by a discriminatory intent or animus. So that would be the hate crimes. That is referred to law enforcement because those are prosecuted in municipal court. Or potentially, if it's a violation of state law, it might be prosecuted by the district attorney. But the district attorney always has discretion whether or not he wishes to prosecute. So that's what we would do with hate crimes, which is essentially what we have now. Then if it's not a hate crime or it's not referred to an alternative body with jurisdiction, then the compliance officer will notify the respondent, essentially that he's keeping it, and the respondent may file an answer within, I believe we said 10 days, or it's within a specific period of time. Then after or during a fuller investigation, the compliance officer will confer with the attorney and the chair of the commission or the alternate designee to determine if there is reasonable cause to believe a Title 25 violation has occurred. If the result of that investigation is no reasonable cause, the compliance officer would enter an ordinance with findings and no further action would be taken. If the result is yes, there is reasonable cause, the compliance officer will seek to conciliate the dispute between the parties. And unfortunately, under the current state law, for a local body such as a Human Rights Commission, you don't have subpoena power. So the respondent's participation is discretionary. And you'll see in a few minutes that that's one of the legislative issues that Councilwoman Nice and Hammond wanted on, and other members of the Policy and Legislative Committee wanted put on a legislative agenda for the city to consider seeking amendments to the statutes to effectuate that. But right now it's going to be the respondent's participation is discretionary, which is why you want it to be able to be investigated and discussed in a private context with a administrative officer, the attorney, and the chair of the commission or some alternative designee. You want the discussions to be private, otherwise you're not going to get a respondent participating. They just won't show up. So that's where we're at right now. If you look at the Title 25, Chapter 21, and specifically the section that deals with local commissions, you'll see that that's what it says the authority of the local Human Rights Commission is. Now, if you look at the Attorney General sections in Title 21 or 25, Chapter 21, you'll see that the Attorney General has been given a lot more authority, such as to go to district court to seek injunctive relief or damages, etc. But the local commission has not been granted that authority in Title 25. So those will also be possible legislative issues that the city might seek on behalf of the Human Rights Commission to attempt to provide stronger remedies other than just conciliation. So then if the conciliation occurs, a conciliation order would be entered and all parties would have to sign that. So potentially that could be enforced by the complainant or the respondent, but by the complainant in a court action. Essentially, it would be a contract. As long as they're both voluntarily participating and voluntarily agreeing to sign the conciliation order, that's probably the enforcement mechanism there. If the conciliation fails, or if the conciliation order is not followed, then the compliance officer will meet with the attorney again, or the chair, or the alternative designee to determine if the petition should be referred to a state or federal officer or agency or local organization with jurisdiction, or if no further action should be taken. One caveat there, if the commission does a committee of its membership to be the alternative designee, you will run into Open Meeting Act issues there. As long as it's not, if it's actually a designated subcommittee, as opposed to say one alternative commission member as the designee, you're going to have to comply with the Open Meeting Act. So then that makes it non-private. So that might be counterproductive. So really, if you have the chair, the vice chair, or even just a single member of the commission as the designee over a particular petition to meet with these folks, then you're not going to invoke the Open Meeting Act. So finally, note that the ordinance is written so that the Title 25 violation petitions would be subject only to the administrative process and possible conciliation or referral to the state or federal officer or agency, et cetera. And Title 25 petitions allegations would not be prosecuted in municipal court. We would only prosecute, which is actually a criminal misdemeanor, in municipal court if it's the hate crime. So those are the kind of highlights. And I probably should pause here and see if anybody has any questions on the highlights. None appearing, I will proceed.
There is a question, Valerie. I see your hand. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can unmute yourself. You're on mute.
I had a question after reading the proposed structure and wonder if you anticipate that most petitions or complaints will be referred to an appropriate agency or to law enforcement based on how this works.
Law enforcement for sure on the hate crimes. If it's actually a hate crime with physical damage or property damage, you're going to want to refer those to law enforcement so you can get a prosecution on that if it's warranted. On the Title 25 violations, that, they don't have to be referred. It's going to be kind of a discretionary determination on that. Rita can probably, I don't see her face, but I'm sure she's on there. She can probably fill you in on her experience in the past, because what they tried to do there was conciliate those complaints. It may be determined by a discussion with let's say the petitioner or the complainant, basically, about what they're hoping to gain out of the process. Because if they want more than just an attempted conciliation with the respondent, then they probably would want it to be referred to the AG or to a federal or other federal or state agency. Although I think the AG may be the designated state agency for that. Rita, I know, had quite a bit of success with the previous human rights ordinance where they just conciliated disputes between parties. What do you have to say about that, Rita?
That's correct. We
Yeah.
did. And that was what the parties wanted. It works well if both parties want a process that's outside the judicial system and outside of any formal state agency, state or federal agency. So they met with this group that were members of the Human Rights Commission at the time. And it was very successful because that's what the parties wanted it to be.
So in
Are
other
those-
words, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, were those conciliation processes private and confidential?
They were private in the sense that they were in a small room in City Hall, and they were confidential in that only staff was present, and usually it was the chair of the commission and one other person, and then the parties just talked. We recorded what they said, and we established whatever resolution they decided was what they came to. And then that was the end of it. They knew that they had other options available to them, but they chose this one. And as I've mentioned before, most of the time, the aggrieved party just wanted to be heard. And this provided that forum for that person.
And there's a good argument if you're in a private setting like that with just the lawyer, the conciliation officer, the chair of the commission or designee, and the complainant and the respondent, that the compliance officer could just take notes on what the parties may be tentatively agreeing to. And as long as they're just his personal notes and they're not spread out among the other parties, I think we can keep that. We have a good argument that it's not an open record then. I don't think you want it to be an open record until you actually have an agreement, or unless it falls through. But he may be able to call it a personal note provided as an aid to his memory before a final determination. That's one of the problems we have with keeping things confidential, is the Open Records Act and the Open Meeting Act. So you just kind of have to try to be creative.
Valerie, did you have any other questions?
I'm also wondering whether the compliance officer is a full-time employee and whether that officer also has duties other than for the HRC.
That would probably be up to the city manager. I don't know whether Rita worked with Joyce Plunkett previously, and I don't know if Joyce did other things or just did solely the Human Rights Commission, but it'd be up to the city manager. But I don't know. You'd have to ask him. Is Jane here?
I'm here. Yeah. I mean, he's essentially indicated that he's not necessarily interested in adding a position, certainly not right away until there's like an idea of how much activity there would be with that person would have. So anyway, he's contemplating various options.
And probably if it ended up becoming a full-time job, he would designate somebody just to do that.
Right. I would think so. Eventually. Takes a lot of pain and suffering before that happens. but yeah, I think that's kind of what he's thinking, that at least to start, that it wouldn't be a full-time, there's not going to be enough activity really for a full-time position.
And we can handle that as it comes as well. So I'll keep my eye on that, so that Ms. Valerie, so we'll keep looking at that as we continue to work through this. And maybe there's a way for us to maybe add it to the resolution, Mr. Kinney, that the possibility, depending on maybe if we look at this every year, evaluate the cases that we see, and if there is a demand as far as those cases that we see, that we look at adding a full-time position or a position to this human rights task or to the Human Rights Commission, excuse me. Is
Yeah,
that a possibility?
I think we could, on the section on the compliance officer, it already says it's going to be appointed by the city manager, but I can add some language in there that, that the city manager will review annually whether or not the compliance officer it's more appropriate for him to be a part-time compliance officer or a full-time compliance officer or something like that. He'd just review that on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you very much. I see two hands, Bruce Alexander and David Hall.
Councilwoman Nice, can I ask a question real quick? I was just wanting to make sure Valerie was done with her questions and thoughts.
Would you turn your camera on for me, please?
I'm
Thank
here.
you.
Hey, my question was, how is the designee, if it's outside of the chair, selected?
It would have to be somebody that the commission, I'm sure the compliance officer will report to you what petitions he has received, because those will be open records all the time if he receives a petition.
Recording in progress.
So he could, the compliance officer can, getting some feedback there. The compliance officer could inform the commission, and you could have an agenda item where the commission would appoint that designee if they want someone other than the chair.
Okay, we'll move on to Bruce Alexander and David.
I think Bruce lost his connection because now I don't see him at the top anymore.
Okay, thank you, David. If you are here, and for those, when you are speaking, I will ask that you turn your camera on, only because this is a public meeting. So we just want to make sure we get that recorded. So I hope you don't mind that. Thank you very much.
So I was just gonna interject for part of the question about the compliance officer. Just generally speaking, it is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilwoman Nice, but it is my understanding that we do have some funds set aside in the budget, or at least there's plans to. So while I'm not necessarily certain if that will be within the compliance officer or another person, those funds will take care of a person if and when we need it. I just didn't want people to think that like we just wouldn't have anyone doing it if we only have a few cases. Like there will be a person in, depending on the volume, we'll have the money if we need it.
Thank you. And Mr. Kenny, maybe you can address that, but that is correct. That is what we did approve that was approved in our last for this budget fiscal year.
Yes, Jane probably knows more about that than I do.
Yes.
If you have money in the budget, I'm sure, and plus the budget can always be supplemented if necessary. It's
right.
Yeah, I don't think, I think if you have a sufficient number of complaints that you need somebody that's full-time, that the city manager will address that.
And Jane, is the budget line item is specific to homelessness, the criminal justice piece, and human rights? And so we're not sure how that's going to be split.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it was allocated to all of the task forces that are going on right now.
And you'll also have Rita. So she is very, very self-motivated and enterprising. So, I mean, she'll do whatever's necessary to help you.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Did Bruce end up back on this call?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, whenever, I think, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry. Because I was going to talk, but I wanted to
back
keep
the computer.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. And then I have a question after.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep it brief, but so from what we had initially decided upon, I think we decided on 13 to 21 as 13 being our floor on the number of council members. And instead it was used as our top number to compromise. And we ended up with 11, which is drastically similar to what we've had in the past. And there's been a lot of, I understand that there's a lot of legalities and a lot of things that we can't do, but I was hoping that we were going to have some stuff different than what we've done in the past. And it seems like, I'm hearing a lot of, as we've already had in place or as we've done before, and everything that we kind of poured over to try to remake and kind of create something different has been kind of tossed away. And we've just recreated the same Human Rights Council that was disbanded previously. I think that pretty much covers my entire concern. Is it all just the litigation that we have to address later on, or?
It's to have more authority than to conciliate a complaint. You're going to have state legislative changes to the Title 21 statutes or Title 25, Chapter 21 statutes. And those are the ones that are listed on the separate sheet about the possible legislative items. In terms of the numbers of the commissioners, I heard from 2 council members who want 9. And I think if we change it to 13, it'll probably get amended down. So that's why I picked 11 to be, it's actually closer to 13 than it is. No, it's not. It's the midpoint between 9 and 13. So that's kind of why I picked 11. And I think the 11 will be agreeable to everyone. But I mean, I can change it to 13 if you wish.
As far as I understand is, as a committee, we were hoping for something much higher, and 13 was kind of like where we thought we might land, that we would get amended down to 13 if we started at 19 or 20 instead of just starting at 11 and not even hoping that we might be able to get more council members in.
Right. It's whatever you want. If you make a recommendation that we change it to 13, I'll change it to 13 and have 2 more at-large members.
Whatever. I'm just voicing what we had talked about before, and I just want to make sure I understand what's happening, because right now I feel like everything that we talked about is just gone. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. If that's what everybody wants, then that's what everybody wants. And I'm a team player, but I just want to make sure that we all voice our opinions, and the things that we said, either we stand behind them or we changed our minds. That's fine. I personally have not changed my mind. I still think that a diverse council is very important, and having 11 members is the absolute minimum version of that.
Well, if you don't, I'll say this, to the point of what Mr. Kinney said is very true, because I don't want to say it was a contentious meeting between the 4 members, but it did go back and forth quite a bit as far as some concessions and agreements. And the unfortunate part is we still have some of our council who are in the mindset that is different than others pertaining to what this newly established Human Rights Commission should look like. Some would rather have it just reestablished and nothing more, whereas clearly the goal of what we're doing is to see it better. So I'm happy, just like Mr. Kinney, to look at adding the 13 and going from there, if that's what the majority of you all would like to see. I will say we want to get it to the finish line. That's where we are. And if you've seen some of our past council meetings pertaining to other things we have voted upon, it could be a conversation that will possibly, I don't want to say it won't, but it could possibly get us into a place where it's going to be very hard for us to get the things we need. So I just want us to keep that in mind. as we continue to go through this. But I mean, if we want to do 13, more than happy to work through starting that process. So I know we had some more hands that came up. If you don't mind, with I'm going to ask Dr. Benjamin and Miss Rita to speak, and then David, I see your hand, and Reverend Crudup, I see you. So we'll go in that order if you don't mind.
Miss Rita, did you have something pertaining to this number? I saw you put your hand up then, so my thing isn't related to that, so.
Oh, mine is related to the number. One of the things that you might want to consider is how it is that you meet. If you meet in council chamber, there are only so many seats there. We have an experience with a commission that I staff where if everyone comes, there aren't enough seats. So there are people who sit behind and don't have a microphone. So in a sense, they don't have the same voice, even though they actually do. So another thing you might want to consider, instead of the actual members around the horseshoe, might be to have various committees and have chairs of those committees, and then have those committee chairs make reports to the whole. You could still accomplish the same work, and you could still involve the same or more people in the process, but they wouldn't all necessarily have a seat at the same time around the horseshoe. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, I'd forgotten that point, that how many, we have 9 council members now, plus the city manager, the municipal councilor, and the city clerk. So you've got 12 seats up there. So if you have 13 or more, you can get 12 up there, but then your staff, the staff will be out in the audience, and also one commission member will be somewhere else, or at least in the background. 11, you can get everybody up there, except for maybe the lawyer. Where did you sit before, Rita? Of course, you just had 9. How many members did you have in the previous one? 9?
I think we had 7, maybe.
7, okay.
I'll have to look at it again. And yes, we sat on the horseshoe. Tiny quick bit of trivia, horseshoe was at the other end of council chamber at that time.
Awesome, thank you. I just wanted to chime in on 2 things. One is we did receive an email, just a clarification on some of the language in the early parts of section 25, around sort of, I think the person said 25-6B include genetic information, but that doesn't show up on any of the other lists. And then 25A includes ancestry, marital status, familial status, sexual orientation. 25-1B lists age, 25-1E includes ethnicity, and 25-54 uses creed. So I just wanted to know, are we gonna sort of unify that, make that language uniform across all the?
Yes, I'll let Rita address that a little bit fuller, but on the creed, the creed word in 2554, that's actually an existing word in the hate crimes ordinance, so we didn't take it out.
Okay.
Although maybe it should be, but on the sections 25-1, I think that was mostly what the Policy and Legislative Committee recommended, and we just copied that. But I think Rita said she was going to go through that and try to make it consistent, and look more closely at Title 25 and see exactly what Title 25 says.
Yes, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to fix that.
Okay, thanks. I just want to ask, and I don't, the person could chime in if they want to, but okay. The only other thing I want to say is I definitely hear Bruce, but I want us to sort of not, like, I think we've spent a lot of time on sort of the cases, but let's not forget the other powers that the commission has, in terms of investigations, and I don't mean into cases, I mean like research and making presentations to the council and getting grants. So I think, even though I think we spent a lot of time on sort of like what happens when people complain, which I do think is important, the reality is, to our earlier point about staffing, initially, what if there's not that many complaints? Like, we still have other work to do, and there are things that we can be working on. So I don't want people to feel like because it's not everything that we envisioned initially, that it's nothing. I think there's still something here. I think there's still opportunities for us to do really good work in the commission. And again, from my vantage point as a researcher, other cities that have good HRCs, most of what they spend their time in is not seeing cases. It's doing research, it's making recommendations, it's addressing needs as they come to the city, not necessarily in a case way. And so I hope that we don't lose sight of that this is not we're not becoming judges if we get appointed to the commission. We're doing work. We're working on things, we're doing research, we're advocating, we're presenting to the council. As questions come up, we might be tasked different subcommittees are going to be doing different things. So I don't want people to think that just because we can't find people that now we're not doing anything. So I really hope that people did take the time to look at some of the other sort of things that the commission will actually be doing, and not feel so deflated that it isn't everything we wanted, when I still think that there's quite a few pieces in there that are really important and will really, I think, bring some solutions and remedies to things that are going on in our city that are not necessarily from individual complaints about bad things happening. So I just wanted to say that.
And you'll be able to appoint as many subcommittees as you want. You can appoint subcommittees of the members, or you can appoint committees of other people who are volunteers to be on those committees. They could even designate one or two members of the task force to research a particular issue and come back with a report or something.
I'll just kind of throw that out there. There's sort of a model with that with the MAPS boards. They have subcommittees that don't sit on the board itself, but they're part of the process in terms of doing research and analyzing projects, et cetera.
I know we had David and Pastor Crudup, and then we'll come back to you, Bruce.
Yeah. So I just want to say too, whenever we were in the meeting with the city initially proposing this, what we could actually do. I will say, and Councilwoman Nice knows this because she was on there, that like I went through that with fine tooth comb, seeing what should have been there, and there was actually stuff that was later added. That was missed or needed to be added to help a little bit, make sure we could do as much as we could. But I will say, from the standpoint of doing as much as we can with what we're legally allowed, as in what the state actually gives us the ability to do, it is there. I think I can probably speak a little more freely than other people, but I will say it kind of sucks a little bit that that's as much as we can do right now. I was hoping we could do more. I don't want to act like that's not the case. But as much as we are able to do is in there. And then with that, the way that some things are worded, when state law changes, those are already taken care of. Only because of the way that it's worded. Now with the membership, I get that. So, and I will just remind everyone that, we're welcome to vote on that if you would like to change it. I will say that there are some council members that it's possible that even something as small as numbers, they might not vote in favor just for that. I don't understand why, but that is how they feel. So, from the standpoint of, it seems like, from what he said, it seems like no one is upset over the number 11. Then that might be good, but considering it did already have the 13, again, we can always vote on it, but just keep that in mind that they did, that if there was problems with 13, but there wasn't with 11, it might be best for 11. And then the last thing to say for everyone too, is that the current language that's in there, we do have what we wanted to ensure that what I think would maybe be the most quality people are on there, is that we have subcommittee members are given preference before the big HRC is appointed. So so I don't want anyone to think either that that it's just gonna be a bunch of people that know people. It's people that are committed to the work first, and then they're able to join it.
Yes, and I think also on the numbers, that picking 11 being the midpoint between 13 and 9, I think Councilman Nice will have a good argument on that. If somebody objects to 11 once we get it in front of the council, I think she has a good argument that the recommendation was for 13 or even more, and we knew some people wanted 9, so we picked 11 as the compromise. So I think 11 will fly, and I haven't received any negative feedback from anyone on 11.
Thank you. Pastor Crudup and then Bruce.
Thank you. As I was reading through, I have kind of two questions. One is on 25-9, limitations and other remedies. My question is there any way that other departments can, if you will, disrupt the work of the Human Rights Committee or Commission as they are, let's say, they're in the middle of deliberation, they're in the middle of trying to find out information. How does that work? Will the commission be protected there? And then the second question that I have is on the acceptance of gifts, grants, bequests, private and public. Will those gifts be made public so that we kind of know who's bringing in funds and what kind of relationship those organizations have to the committee and or to the council?
Yes, on the grant, on the gifts or grants question, someone wants to make a gift to the city for the purpose of funding civil rights issues, promotion of civil rights, et cetera, prevention of discrimination. That would be a gift to the city. They could make it a conditional gift, that the condition would be that it only be used for that purpose. And then when the city accepts that gift, the city council has to accept gifts. They would, essentially, it would end up in a special account and be used only for the purpose it was donated for. So I think that addresses your concern there. And your other concern was, remind me again of your first point. I forgot.
The limitations and other remedies. Can other departments kind of get in the way of the work of the Human Rights Commission? Let's just say if the Human Rights Commission is investigating an issue that is tied to someone or something, and that person has the ability to overstep or, thinks that they might have the ability to overstep. I'm just trying to make sure that, and then to follow up with the gifts, I do have something else, but I'll let you answer that one as well.
Sure. On your point about the limitations, the commission and the compliance officer would not be dealing with an allegation that occurs from an incident involving any city official or employee acting in his or her official capacity as a city official or employee. Almost all city employees are under the city manager, and under the city charter, the manager has exclusive control of his personnel. So that basically has to be handled by the city manager. In terms of the city council, they're elected officials. State law is going to affect, govern whether or not they have made any violation. You're essentially going to have to get a state official that tries to go against a city council member. Then the city manager works for the council. So in other words, the commission wouldn't do any official work. I mean, if you get a complaint against a city official, or if you get a complaint against And when I say city official, I mean a council member, or, I mean, you could always pass a resolution saying that it should be looked into by someone, absolutely. But you wouldn't have any official capacity in dealing with complaints against city officials or employees. So, but you're limited to that. You can't do that. That's in subsection A. In subsection B, all that says is that the petition, if somebody files a petition, but they're also seeking relief from a state or federal body or organization, you won't deal with that. So in other words, if they filed an EEOC complaint already, the commission, the Oklahoma City HRC would not then look at their petition filed with you. It's basically been filed with a superior agency. They're going to come to you if they want to try to resolve something on a lower level basis of just an agreement to deal with the concerns of the person filing the complaint. And I know Rita, you might think that doesn't work, but I know Rita has experience with that in the past of it working out, that it actually, there is an opportunity to resolve something just by people talking and them agreeing to what will resolve it.
It's true.
Then on subsection C, what that says is it's basically going to go through your administrative process, and we're not going to attempt to prosecute violations of Title 25 in municipal court. We couldn't directly prosecute a statute anyway, but I think you're going to run into complications, real complications, if we try to make those criminal offenses. First of all, you're going to have to involve the police department, because they would be the body that would investigate criminal offenses. Right now, they would be limited to just doing the hate crimes, which aren't just discrimination, but which a hate crime is motivated by discriminatory intent, but it results in physical or property damage. So that's what would be prosecuted. The others would just go through, say, a discrimination in an accommodation or something, would just go through your administrative process. Then subsection D just says that your functions are supplementary to any other remedies provided by law or other processes of city, state, or federal government. So there's really that no other city department is going to be able to interfere with your work.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, because as I'm reading through, one of the things that I'm concerned about is the ways in which departments, let's just say we're asking for particular information, can slow down whatever process we have to determining whether this should be seen by the commission or should be sent somewhere else. Or as we're looking at these things, I'm just kind of always worried about, do we have something in place to make sure that departments are being helpful instead of trying to slow down the process? So I was just wondering about that. As it pertains to the gifts, what I'm getting at more so is that, especially when it comes to picking folks who should be on this commission, will it be something to where, let's just say we know that there's some big donor that they're not given the priority to be on the commission because they've given a lot of money? That's what I'm really concerned about. So I'm trying to speak as plainly as possible. Government has has a way of kind of getting around the rules. And we want to make sure that the people who are on this committee are there because they really are concerned about the human rights of people.
I think on the 8 ward people, the mayor's going to appoint those after consulting with the council member from the ward. So say Nikki will have input on who she would like to be appointed. And the mayor takes those seriously, I know. So for the 8 members, it's going to be the council members who essentially make an unofficial nomination, and the mayor will probably go with it unless there's some reason he objects to it. He's not going to rush out there and just pick somebody on his own. He'd say, well, I don't know about that person, but do you have another one? I think that's kind of how it would work. I've actually never been in the room when that's been taking place, but I'm assuming that that's kind of how it goes. Nikki could probably tell you better than I can. But in any event, so that's 8 of your members right there. And then the other 3 are going to be at large. And I suspect that the mayor always looks for people who have the qualifications to carry out the mission. I know that. And I don't think you're going to have any gifts on human rights issues before the commission is actually constituted. So I'm thinking you're not going to have anybody initially that's appointed there that's given a gift for human rights purposes. So I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts on that, Rita or Jane? I don't think that's going to end up playing a factor in it.
I don't think so. And the reason would be because of the commission itself. A person who made a large donation, perhaps hoping to sway something, would still be countered by all the rest of the members of the Human Rights Commission. So they'd have something to say, but then so would the rest of the members. And so I think they would have limited sway.
And one thing I didn't mention in the highlights is that in the recommendations originally, you wanted an extraordinary number of commissioners to be a quorum. In other words, I forget the exact number, but you wanted more than a majority to be a quorum to be able to do business. So for the 11, I incorporated that in by making it 7. So even though 6 would be the majority, you don't really want an even number and end up having tie votes. So I just made it 7. So you would have to have 7 of the 11 people at the meeting to actually vote on something. So any other questions?
I know we have a couple more hands, and I want you to keep in mind, you all, we're still on item 3. So we still have a couple more items to get through before 8 o'clock. So I believe we had David, Mariana, I see your hand, David and Miss Valerie. No.
Sorry, I didn't know who to go, so I'll just go. So I just wanted to check, this is more of a details thing, that how we have the one person that has to practice law or whatever we use for the educated in law, that it wasn't accidentally restricting it to just the at-large. I wanted to make sure that we had that available to all board members, just that way it made it easier to have someone on the commission that did understand that. I just wasn't sure about that. I wanted to check.
Under the qualifications, let's see. It says at least one of the 11 members appointed to the commission shall be a person who practices law or is appropriately educated in law as determined by the mayor. So it could be it can be any one of the 11 members or even more than 11, but at least one.
All right, thank you.
Sure. And also, as recommended, a majority of the members shall be selected from racial, religious, or other recognized minority groups. So that's going to be one of the conditions for when people nominate. They're going to have to meet those qualifications.
Mariana?
Just wanted to echo and just kind of share a real life example of what the Reverend was saying. I'm aware of municipalities where their commissions, because of the communications department and or legal department, their reports, proclamations, press releases have been striked, prohibited, or restricted. And so I'm not sure if that can be addressed in the ordinance, because I know of cities where their commissions have been limited, their scope of work have been limited in that way by internal municipal departments.
Well, the departments can't do that.
So for example, if we have a press release, are we able to, if the commission has a press release, would the commission be able to approve and circulate that on its own? Or is there an internal process with the city that the city would have to vet, approve, et cetera, any documents that are created by the commission itself?
If you want it to be a city press release, an official city press release, it's going to have to go through the city manager. Christy Yeager is the city's officer that does that, in charge of a public information office. So it would go through her and the city manager, and also her assistant city manager, which is that Laura?
I think it's Aubrey.
Aubrey.
Mhm.
So essentially, those would be the three people to do it, to make sure to have it go on the city website, or to be an official City of Oklahoma City press release. Now, nothing can stop you from passing your own resolution, and you can have a resolution and you can direct the chair of the commission to take it to the channel 4, 9, and 5 and the newspapers, and essentially it'd come directly from you. But if you want to actually make it a city press release, it essentially goes through the city manager and his department head on that.
And I'll actually give you an example of what happened with us. I actually sit on the MAPS 3 Citizens Advisory Board, and we had a resolution for one of our past members, Mr. Sam Bowman, who was also a previous council member, for his commitment to the MAPS 3 process. So we passed that resolution through that advisory board. So we were able to do that, independently do that through that board. So absolutely, that's a prime example of something that just happened. So that was something new for me in the process as well.
Yes, your resolutions, you're going to have control over those. You can say anything in those you want to.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, I see Miss Valerie, I see Bruce and Miss Ayana.
I have a question and maybe a suggestion for 25-6J. This is referencing the annual forum or educational event that the HRC does. And I think that's going to end up being a very important part of our work. And I would suggest that we end the sentence after human rights concerns. This says to educate the public regarding human rights concerns of racial and other minorities. And I'm just thinking now we might want to do a forum on women's rights or the rights of children or environmental concerns that impact human rights. And so I'm wondering if we're limiting ourselves too much to in that one educational event.
Sure, that's no problem at all. I can just take out the words of racial and other minorities. Essentially, would be limiting it to minority issues. So, yeah, just take that out and just say regarding human rights concerns, and then the commission itself can define what it believes is a human rights concern.
Hey, Kenny, this is Mark Stonecipher. Can you
Yeah.
tell me again where Valerie was speaking from?
Mr. Stonecipher, can you turn your camera on, please, for this public meeting? Thank you.
Yeah, it's that was section 25.6, subsection J. And on the ordinance, it's at page 6 of 11, at the top of page 6 of 11, where it says to sponsor or participate in at least one annual forum, et cetera. And essentially you put a period after human rights concerns and take out the other 5 words. Did you see that? Did we lose Mark?
Not sure.
Yeah.
Well, Ms. Valerie, did that answer your question?
Yes, I think it would be more liberating for us to have more expression of what we do.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I think it would give us more freedom to choose topics. Human rights is a huge area, and we wanted to do something on the status of women in Oklahoma City. That's not really focusing on a minority or a particular race.
Can I just interject? I thought that Rita had previously said that we are kind of narrowed in our scope as to what we can address, including that we are not allowed to, children are covered by a different group. There's a different association, which we were kind of narrowed in our scope. And that's why we said minorities and not the other things, because they kind of said we wouldn't be able to talk about anything outside of those 7 protected classes. Is that correct?
This would be fine. The amendment that's proposed would be fine. It would not be contrary to state law.
Right, it's not, it's definitely not. It's just, this is just talking about a forum or an educational event. You're not going to be taking any type of official action related to it. Just providing education.
Okay, if I can piggyback off of that, to my previous statement, I'm gonna poke the bear one last time before we put this all in stone. I believe the reason why we tried to go so high with our number is because we had come up with over 25 classes in which we wanted to represent, and it's going to be pretty hard to represent even half of that with only 11 seats at the table. And if the reason why we're stopping at 11 seats at the table is because we don't want to get another chair, that bothers me just a little bit. If it's because it fits nicely, that I don't think that that's what we're here to do. I think that there's going to be some upset people by the end of this. There's going to be some people who are not going to agree with everything that we do. And I understand that there's a lot of niceties and a lot of handshaking and a lot of things that you guys have done to get it this far. And I know that I have no idea how much work y'all are doing behind the scenes, but I would hate for it to end up with us being an advocacy group instead of a council. If we have no power to do anything at the end of the day, I mean, that's what we will be. We'll be an advocacy group, which there's a very important part in society for advocacy groups. But I thought I thought that we were envisioning something with a little more bite to it, or at least any bite to it. And at this point, it seems like anything that goes out of our scope can be taken by the appropriate jurisdiction that gets taken off of our plate. we've got a city employee who is two different terms were used. We said administrative assistant at one point, and then we also said a compliance officer. Those sound like two completely different positions. One sounds like someone who is there to help us, and the other one sounds like someone who is there to help the city.
The administrative assistant was what Rita had previously under the old ordinance. It specifically designated a compliance officer in this ordinance.
Okay, so I mean, that's just another issue. And my last thing I will say is that, just it seems that everything about this process has become voluntary, or there's nothing from all of the the talking that we had about something being compulsory, about there being some compulsory part of the process in which you had to, whether it's compulsory education or some sort of something in which the person who has been wronged receives some sort of justice on the other end. It seems like it's been completely taken off the table, and I just want to address that and put that out there. And if this is what we've got and this is what we have to take to council in order for it to pass, then I mean, so be it. I would like to see 15 tried, and then if they can just amend it down to 11 anyways, then why not just go in with a higher number? But I mean, you guys are the council people and the people who do all this stuff. I'm just a guy who has a lot of ideas and just wants to see the best product come out of this that we all kind of started talking about at the beginning. It just feels pretty far away.
I would say on the forcing people to do things, that's a component of the state law that really doesn't give a local human rights commission any strong authority. And what they're charged with being able to do is try to conciliate a complaint. So if you look at the Human Rights Commission Task Force 2022 state legislative priorities, these would be something that you would be recommending to the mayor and council, that the city possibly pursue one or more of these as state legislative amendments. And then these would put in the ability to force people to do things and have more of an investigative and compelling remedy. I mean, the first step is you're going to have subpoena power, because if you don't have subpoena power, you're not going to be able to make anybody show up in front of you. It's just all going to be voluntary anyway. So subpoena power is that's why it's listed as number one on here. And then the others deal with potential remedies or penalties if you found discrimination. So essentially we need to amend state law to add these things. And the most important thing is the subpoena power.
Lastly, just let me say, I think we should look again at the term limits, because it seems like it's going to take 6 years before we ever do anything in which we set out to do. Not saying that everything that was done on the way is not worthy, is not, part of the process. It's all very important. But if you set out to be on the Human Rights Council for the first 4 years that you're eligible, you likely will not get to see in correct procedure a human rights case and do anything about it, because the state legislation won't be anywhere near passed. So I think that maybe we should look at that whole can't try again for 3 years or whatever.
Yes, we could.
Nice. Could you tell how would we do a vote on the number if Bruce wanted to introduce changing that, and it being like a democratic process across all the task force members being able to vote, like you mentioned earlier? How would we do that? How would we conduct that type of business?
I would, Mr. Kinney, correct me, I think the same process we did to approve and move forward with us establishing this, the Human Rights Commission when we all raised our hands on our screen. If we can do that again, hope I'm willing to do that process, or we'll have to do a roll call to see one by one who says yes, yay or nay.
Yes, I would. What you could do is, this is a draft before you, so you could make a motion to amend this to be 13 or some other number. And then you get a second for that and you'd vote on it.
Okay, well, let's move forward. Do I have a motion to change this draft to 13 members?
A motion.
Do I have a second? I have a motion from Bruce Alexander. Do I have a second?
I would second that.
Who's speaking?
Oh, Rabbi Harris.
Thank you, Rabbi Harris. I have a second from Rabbi Harris. For those, if you can find where your hand is and you are approving of us moving and amending to 13, please raise your hand.
Or you can take a voice vote.
It's 35 people on here. Come on, Mr. Kenny. Let me see. I see 9 hands raised. And I have 35 folks. I have 11. I have 35 folks that are on here, and I believe I have 7 that are staff.
Hey, Nikki, could you register me as a no vote, please?
I haven't gone to the nose, but if you would
Thank you.
please put your camera on. Are you under Miss Debbie's name?
Yes, I couldn't get in under my number.
I just corrected his name.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I see 13. Yes. I'm going to lower those hands for the 13. And for those who would say no, please raise your hand. And I believe we already have counted 1 for Mark Stone Cipher.
Do you know how many committee members we have? We would have 28 committee members. Right?
That's correct.
So you would need 15 votes.
Okay.
Councilwoman, just to verify, we are voting on amending it up to 13 from 11.
Yes, and if you turn your camera on for me. Thank you. Apologize. Thank you. Okay, so I have 10. I have 13 ayes and I have 10 noes. So we will move forward with amending and presenting to the city council for 13 members.
You need a majority of how many people are here? You need a majority of those.
That's 23.
Okay,
That's 23 votes.
got it. 23 yes votes.
No, we had 13. That's 20. We have 23 members, so that's a majority. The
Yeah,
quorum we needed. So we have 13 of our majority that said yes.
Do we have, I'm okay, since Mark is a member, so we have there's 35 people on here, and do we determine there were 7 city staff or 6?
I thought there were 7 of us. So we could count staff and get that out of the way, and the rest would be the actual members that are present. So there's 3 from legal at least. Let me look at the screen and see.
And then Sharita and me.
So that's 5.
Just by checking off the names of task force members, I've counted 24 task force members participating.
24. So there's 1 more vote out there then.
Well, even with that, the majority has spoken.
Yes, with 24, if you have 13 yes, then it passes.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
we will move forward with that amendment to 13. And we'll move forward with that majority. I still had a couple of hands raised. Miss Rita, did you have something from that?
Not from that. I just wanted to continue to urge the commission, the task force to recognize the power you have with your committees and how much you can do through those committees. That was all I wanted to remind you about.
Thank you. All right, Miss Ayana, and I have David, and I still have Councilperson Stone Cipher. And we'll move in that order. And Miss Ayana, if you'll turn your camera on for me. Is she with us?
She's
There she
muted.
is. She's
She's
muted.
muted.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. We can.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
When Mariana was talking about the press releases and our previous speaker was talking about doing it in terms of resolution, has there ever been a case that anyone knows about, and I guess we can ask the general counsel on this, where there's been a conflict in terms of what the resolution may have been versus what the actuality of the situation was, and the communications department has there's been I won't say mix up, there's been some conflict between the a resolution and what has actually gone out into the press?
Specifically with relation to human rights or just any subject?
No, human rights, a human rights issue.
Rita, you'll have to answer that.
I don't recall that we ever submitted any resolutions to the public. But if we did, there would not have been a conflict about it because it would have been written by staff and reviewed by the chair of the commission before it was released.
No, I wasn't concerned about what came from the commission. I was concerned about how, and I think that may have been what Mariana may have been chatting about. Something may have become softened in the communications department. As you know, many times, especially when it gets down to police departments and issues like that, things tend not to be presented as strongly as they really are, because the city wants it to be seen as, a certain kind of way.
I see what you're saying. So the resolution that Mr. Jordan was talking about might allow you to actually get your message. Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess once the resolution has been presented, no matter how strong it may be, the communications department cannot go back and put out a press release that softens that problem. I guess what I'm trying to get to is trying to eliminate as much conflict as possible in terms of who's who and what's what and how things went down.
They just won't put it out. Like if they don't support or they're not behind the resolution, they won't put it out through city channels. Through my department, I've seen where there's a situation that occurs, they don't necessarily agree with how it's going down. That instead of softening it, they just don't put it out, and that just so it doesn't have the city seal on it. And that, like Rita mentioned before, we will be able to, the council would be able to put out resolutions on our own accord, but we may not have city support to do so. So,
okay.
Right.
Well, I guess, and I'm glad you brought that up because what we are trying to be, I think you mentioned it earlier, is trying to be as effective as possible. And, nothing's worse than the press starting to interrogate you on an issue that the resolution presents as being substantive. But then the press says, well, if it was all that and a bag of chips, then why did the city put out a press release to speak to the issue? And so it becomes really a mess, is what I'm trying to get to.
So are you saying then a resolution that says, for example, the Oklahoma City Human Rights Commission has decided that they would like to take up child trafficking, for example, and you say everything that you want to say about it, and then your concern would be that by the time it made it to the press, it had been watered down, and maybe now it was about games they play at daycare. Is that what you're saying?
In some regard, or it could be that the commission has said they're taking up human trafficking. They've talked about there were 50, say, women that were found in some building that had been, captured or whatever at some point. But by the time the reporters start investigating the process, the city is saying, oh, but we didn't, we don't have any records that indicate that there were 50 women even captured. And so they make it seem less important than what it is, even though the commission has said, we've got a stack of paper right here that said, we had children as young as 8 years old that have been trafficked, and they're really more than 50, but based upon what our data shows right now, and Dr. Benjamin's big on research, that it's only 50, but we got probably another 50. So in other words, the city waters it down, and it doesn't become nearly as substantive as it may have been, even though we have a resolution that makes it show that it was an important issue.
So on that one, what I would suggest is that it wouldn't be the city watering it down, it would be the media. And Councilwoman knows about the media and how that reports, how that goes. And in my other life, I was a reporter. The resolution would go exactly the way that you wrote it. But whoever was reporting that would make their own conclusions and interview anybody that they wanted to create the story that they wanted to create. It wouldn't be a slight against this commission by the city. It would be in the journalistic process. So you would be allowed.
And that's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to, that's why I was asking that question, because even though, and I'm a journalist myself, that things can get watered down, misinterpreted, reinterpreted. Before you know it, you don't even recognize the resolution sometimes based upon what the situation is. And so.
Yeah, the resolution's not going to change. You pass the resolution and it should speak for itself. The resolution wording will not change.
I didn't think that I'm not worried about the resolution. I'm worried about as Ms. Rita said, I'm worried about the other misinterpret. I think that was, I thought the question that Mariana was talking about. Can someone come in and decide they want to reinterpret the facts? In other words,
They certainly could do that, but that would be the media doing it, not the city doing it. So let's say this commission passed a resolution that did say there are 3,000 children in human trafficking, and the city said, we have reports that only show 3. The reporter would say the commission says this, but the city says that. And then the public would draw its own conclusion about it. But it wouldn't be a slight against the commission. It would be, here's a fact, the resolution was passed. Here is a fact, the city says it has reports that say something else. And here is a fact, the public will make its own conclusion and decide how it wants to receive that information. But it doesn't take anything away from the commission.
No, well, okay. I wasn't saying it takes anything away from the commission, but what I guess I am saying is you want the commission to be as effective as possible in whatever they put in that resolution, which was one of the reasons why the person making the report was saying, hey, if you're questioning how things are interpreted, do it in a resolution format rather than in a press release. And that way it becomes, stable, not,
Yeah, and that's a good perspective, that it's stable because the commission wrote it, voted on it, adopted it as the voice of the commission. By majority vote, this resolution occurred. And Mr. Jordan suggested that. I think is a great idea. That's how you get your message out.
And there's really no, I don't know of any way you can control potential different statements by other people. I mean, if you just look at the national news, you can see each side has its own truth. I mean, I don't see, you're not going to be able to stop politicians from saying whatever they want to say, whether it's true or not true, or, I mean, the report, as Rita said, the reporters are going to interview multiple sources. and they're going to try to make a determination on their own, or they'll say, well, the commission says this and so says that. So I mean, there's no way to control that.
And just to circle back to the city really quick, they're very good at their jobs. The PIO, the PRM, they're all very good at it. They would not come out and speak against a resolution. It would be in silence. It would be a lack of support, and it would be non-vocal, and that's how they would, that would be the slight. It would never be we're going to come out and speak against the council. It would be a lack of support, and I mean, if you ask me, it is happening already. Our lack of ability to get anything done at this point in the process says just a little bit about the support level of this resolution, and the fact that it's been disbanded twice in the past kind of also says something. But
well, that also speaks to what Pastor was talking about with the gifts. Things could get interpreted any way they want to, depending on who's writing the copy and where their loyalty lies. I pray, my dear brother, that integrity is our utmost goal here in this process, and to bring some justice for people that have been sitting on the back burner and not being represented. That's why we've been spending all these months working on this kind of thing. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councilwoman.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone. I do want to move on to, if we can, I know this is very important, and I just going back and forth with resolutions. Trust me, I've been there, done that. We just had a resolution that we tried to pass an ordinance last week that we could not get passed, and it was very controversial. So trust me when I say I understand the positives and the negatives of even the back end of us as a council trying to work through the wording of what a resolution can be. But I do want you to understand and realize, as well as you just heard, when it comes for these types of committees, that the resolution is what would be the fact statement, as Ms. Rita said, for the commission. So I do want you all to keep that in mind. I'm going to allow councilperson Stonecipher to speak, and then I want to move on so we can get through the other agenda items, because I'm going to hard stop us at 8:00.
Yeah, just briefly. Thank you, Nikki. The one thing that Bruce raised that I feel like we really ought to think about a little is, if we want this Human Rights Commission to be strong and to be effective, term limits scare me, just because it's going to take some time to get up and running. And so I think that's something that we all should consider, and maybe at a later date, 5 years down the road, place term limits on this commission, not in the beginning.
And if that's the will of the commission, I can certainly take that out, the term limit. That would be officially, that'd be another motion for an amendment in a second, and then you'd vote on it.
I move to amend that, the term limits.
I'll second that.
Okay, hold on. What are we amending it to, just for the record?
I like 5 years.
No term limits.
Right.
No term and revisit in 5 years.
No term limits. So the motion is to amend the draft to no term limits and revisit in 5 years. Is that correct?
Specifically, would you make the amendment to section 25-3? Because that's the section that talks about 25-4, because that's the one that talks about the terms of members.
And just a point of information, we'll need to, within this, include the taking out the cooling off period, just because that's a part of the term limits. We had that in addition.
So
which part of it do you want to amend? I want to make sure we write it down correctly.
That's subsection D.
B as
right, boy. 25-4B.
Okay. So you want that taken out altogether?
I mean, if you wanted to put something in there about that it'll be reconsidered in 5 years, we could just say the number of terms a member may serve shall not be limited, but the commission shall review this in 5 years to determine whether term limits are appropriate or something along those lines.
Well, it would actually be the council that would look at that in 5 years, I would think.
Right. Yeah, you guys can't amend the ordinance yourself, but you could make a recommendation on
Okay. So
So
let's,
you
what would that
delete
language
the-
be?
it. I don't have the specific language right off the top of my head, but essentially it would say in 5 years, the commission shall consider the question of whether commission appointments should be term limited and may make a recommendation to the city council at that time, or something along those lines. You'd reconsider it and make a recommendation to council whether it should be changed.
Okay. Bruce, are you comfortable with that motion?
I am.
Okay, and if you'll repeat that, we'll go with it.
I move that we now I've forgotten everything.
Eliminate the term limit, but put a provision in that the commission will reconsider the issue in 5 years and make a recommendation to council, or may make a recommendation to council at that time to provide term limits, something like that.
I move that we eliminate the term limits, and we revisit, or we give the council right to revisit the issue in 5 years and make a recommendation at that point.
Yes.
And
Go ahead.
I'll second that. I just want to tie the motion to section 25-4B.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for that, what you have just heard. So we'll do the same way. All of those, and I say 32 participants, so we'll have to minus those who are with us with the city. So those who say yes, please raise your hands to this amendment. Okay. I have 8. Please, I'm going to lower the hands that I see. I see 10. Are there any other hands who are approving of this amendment change to 25-4B? Okay, I see 10. I am going to lower hands and record 10. For those who say no, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 11 no's. Is that the majority that we have on the call? Because that would make 21.
Could be 4 people are not voting.
Okay, I see 12.
Okay.
I had 12. I'm not sure if that was some, okay. I keep going back to 11, then 12. Okay, I recorded 12 until I saw a hand leave. Okay, I'm recording 12 at no and 10 at yes. So according to my calculations, the no's would be the majority. So that amendment, motion for that amendment has failed. So we will proceed with how it is written. Okay. Here, if we want to continue to discuss this item, that's fine. If we continue, because the goal is for us to approve this draft of this ordinance, for us to move it forward. So if we want to continue to discuss, that's clearly an option, and we can move these a couple of next steps and item 4 and item 5 and revisit in maybe 2 weeks if anyone is comfortable with that. I know again, it's 7:42, and I don't want us to rush through this process. I want us to make sure we give it as much time as necessary. Pastor Crudup, I see your hand.
Yes, I do think that it's critically important that that we make sure that as much of the information that we want in this stays in it. So what I'm saying is, while I would agree that I think the first term needs to be longer, somewhere around 5 years, I do not agree that it should then go back to the hands of some other group to make the decision on whether they will or will not begin the term limits. I think that needs to be expressly stated in this document. If we're going to go longer than 3 years on the first time around, this document needs to say it now. And it doesn't need to be put on somebody else, because we know that certain things take a back seat to whatever else is going on in this city. And we do not want that to happen with this commission.
If you think you're going to want term limits after the initial term, you could build in a term limit provision that becomes effective at a certain date in the future. So in other words, you can say beginning X date, commissioners appointed after that date will not serve more than 2 full terms. So you could do something like that, and then it's automatically in there.
I thought initially we had put that in there, and I thought that's what David was mentioning of the cooling off period. I didn't see it. Did it make the cut?
No, I don't recall that one. Rita, do you recall that being in there?
No, I don't, but it's important to know that whatever you want, you should put in here. I agree with you absolutely there, but the council at any time with enough votes is able to proceed as it chooses to. So if what you want, and this is your time to have your voice heard, then I agree that you should put the language there that you want. The section that you wanted to remove, what about if you changed section A? And because it says, or until a successor is appointed and confirmed, and then put language in there that says, provided that the initial term shall be, and then write something else there, put it in the section A, rather than attempting to eliminate the section B, so that it's clear why you want it that way. That the inaugural commission shall serve for a term of, and maybe make it the 5 years that you're talking about, rather than the 3.
Would you like me to give a point of information on the cooling off period and all that?
Yes.
All right. So in 25-4 subsection B, yes, subsection B. Let's see. Yes. It says that there's a cooling off period of 3 years after their second consecutive term. So we have that, and then I believe the total, because it's 2 consecutive terms is what it is, then they would currently serve up to 6 as it is right now, as the wording is, assuming they did 2 terms back to back. So it wouldn't be one and done. As far as 3 years, it would be, if they wanted to do 2, they could, up to 6, and then just basically waiting a term for their seat, generally speaking. And then, but they could serve on the subcommittees and all that, and then come back if they'd like, if there's room.
Yes, that's exactly right. So you would have potentially 6 years to serve before the term limit would come in. And if you don't think the 6 years is long enough, you could even have it where they could serve up to 9 years. That say at the completion of each member's third consecutive term or something like that. But right now you could serve 2 3-year terms, except for the original, except for the let's see, let me read that again. Under A, under A, it'd be 5 years for the even numbered terms, because they start off with 2 years, and after that they're 3 years. So the wards 2, 4, 6, and 8 would be could serve 5 years initially, and the other wards would serve 3 years, or excuse me, 6 years initially, or could, and then the at-large people could serve 6 years. So that's what you have right now with and then you have the term limit and the cooling off period, as David termed it.
What I would like to see happen is basically in some term or fashion, that first term basically stricken from the record. So that's like a structuring term that is not going to be an active term as a council member. I mean, whether it's 2 or 3 years, I think that is all going to be the foundational work of building the infrastructure, and there's not going to be much counseling happening. It is my general guess. As Pastor Crudup was saying, I think that he is absolutely right about leaving it to somebody else to make that decision. But if we could figure out a way to just basically say, after the first term, then everything else that we've already got in goes into effect.
Okay, I want to recognize Ms. Deborah Jenkins' hands, and then we'll come back to this, unless I'm sure this may be related to it. So let's listen to you, and then we'll discuss.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Nice. I just think that unless you have some type of term limit in this document, it may be very difficult to get it through the city council. Does it make sense, since we have heard 5 years, does it make sense to just state that members of the commission shall be appointed for a term of 5 years, and then no member may serve more than 2 consecutive terms? I mean, does that get you there? Because that gives a commission member 10 years total. I just don't know that, if I were reviewing this document and there was no term limit on it, that someone could be appointed to a commission and serve indefinitely, that I would support that. I'll just be very honest with you.
And I agree. I think that's where we've caught ourselves in a conundrum already with our boards, commissions, and trusts overall with our city, for folks serving consecutive terms, being able to continuously serve. So I would hope that you all would consider us having stricter. I mean, I understand we have to get it started, but I hope you all would consider us having stricter terms, because we need various voices at the table. We need all voices at the table. So I just hope we'll continue to look at that. I have Reverend Crudup and then Miss Ayana, and we'll go in that order. You're muted, Pastor.
Thank you. My only concern with the full decade of service is that you have the 13 or the 11 or whatever it's going to be serving for a full decade, and that's a lot of time.
That's too long.
I do think that the initial group needs to be there just a little bit longer to help establish and provide some continuity. But here's what I will say. That initial group then, I think can only serve, this is just me talking. If they're going to serve 5, that initial time, that initial group can only serve another 2. And that's it. They have to take a break. And then we start the process that we have written down. I don't think that it's good to have someone there for an entire decade.
I agree.
Miss Ayana?
I agree with Pastor. The other thing about that, though, is that you were talking about, the organizational structure and being able to get things off and running. I think if there's a way that we could even include some, some specifics in this document that kind of would eliminate a lot of time of things being launched and moving forward. Because the way it sounds is if you're talking about almost 10 years and it's going to take a couple of years to get things off and running, that's, a lot of time wasted where the issues have been sitting on the back burner all these years anyway. So I'm wondering, is there a way to have it 2 3-year terms and no more than that for a person? Because, and then there are some things that we could maybe put in some language we could put in this document that kind of helps to move things forward in terms of, jump starting the process in terms of the inaugural commission.
I think that was left ambiguous by David specifically, so we could actually work once we got into council. Because if we try to put it all down on paper and it doesn't line up like we think it's going to, we are bound by the ordinance that we've written.
Right, but the deal about that is at least you have some idea, you're providing some guidance on how things should be, rather than waiting to, I think Councilwoman mentioned it earlier, you got a bunch of different people, no, maybe someone else did, you've got some cases that started that, by the time they get to some actual solution, that person is off of the commission. And so to drag it out, I guess what I'm saying, beyond 6 years is really too much. Too much.
Ms. Jenkins?
And
Oh,
I
sorry.
really think that's my point. When I talk about 5 years, I heard someone mention 5 years, that we would revisit this after 5 years. So, my point was, do you address that up front instead of saying, well, we'll come back and revisit this after 5 years? Also, it speaks to Ayana's point, is that, this is a new commission, and, you don't want to get people to a point where they're comfortable with what they're doing, and then all of a sudden they're being replaced. So yeah, 10 years may be too long, but I think if you want to address the terms, you have to address it up front. That's really my only point, is whatever you intend to do, I think you need to put it in the document initially, instead of coming back and saying in the document, well, they're going to serve for X period of time, and then we'll come back in a few years and revisit it and then decide what the actual term should really be.
What about
because
like,
well, the other thing about that, it really goes back, and our general counsel can speak to this. What was your intention when you started writing the document? And the intention, if it's not indicated there in this document, it gets misinterpreted 10 years down the road.
Well, I think to that point, and Dr. B, maybe you can help us with this. This was part of that questionnaire that we all asked, that was answered by all of us, what the term limit should be. So that's how we got to this point. And so they're just transcribing the things that we voted on. Absolutely. And the majority said. So that's why it's in the document the way that it is. So if there is a different way, Mr. Kinney, we can look at this. Is there, as far as the term limits? I know with our legislative and action policy, it was went over a couple of times with a fine-tooth comb. So it's not as if it hadn't been vetted many times before we brought this to you all. So this is the recommendation of that body. And I understand there's still discussion to go forward and to move with this, as far as us approving this to take it to the city council. But I do want you to keep those things in mind this didn't come out of left field as far as these terms. These were voted upon because we had all kind of different options. That's how we voted upon the member body. That's how we voted upon the terms of the member body. And that's how we voted upon the legislative action of this body as well, as far as the things that we would take forward and move in front as far as the priorities. So I do want you all to also keep those things in this perspective as well. So I have 757. I do want you to keep in mind, I will take this to 805 only because this is a really great discussion. I don't want to rush it because it is a great discussion, but I don't want us to continue to reintroduce ourselves, should I say, to the things that we've all in our individual bodies have worked on, approved, and passed to each other body as far as our subcommittees are concerned for us to get to this final stage. So please keep that in mind. Pastor Crudup.
Thank you. And again, I can only speak for myself. I'm not in any way trying to take out this portion. I think what just needs to happen is that initial group has the time to really set it up. So I would suggest that if we don't add anything in, maybe we just add this one simple part where it just says that the initial commission serves an automatic 2 terms. That would automatically give them
6 years.
It already allows that. So
Well,
it's more of a by
automatic.
choice issue.
That's not automatic. I'm speaking in terms of automatic, that we know that they are going to be there for 6 years and not that they could potentially be there. And I think that was the language that we were using earlier, was that they could, if they so choose, or if they were chosen by the council to be there 6 years. I'm saying, I think that initial group needs to be an automatic. Now, if I'm misrepresenting what's said, please help me out, but that's how I'm reading it.
I believe that's how I'm reading it also. And I don't mean to speak for you, but you're saying remove the requirement for them to be reappointed for that initial commission, and that they will automatically serve 6 years.
6 years, bro.
That's right.
Well,
Okay.
but the even commissioners are only going to serve 5 because they're still going to be on 2 plus a 3, so we can get a stagger. Is that correct?
That does the stagger. That's why. Okay, never mind.
You don't have to have the stagger if you want. You could have them all the terms up. You could have all of them serve 6 years to be in the initial term, and then they could serve, commissioners appointed after that could serve 3 years, or you could start staggering it then.
I think if you start with the stagger, and that was one oversight that I have, sure, I think that would still be good. 5 or 6 years, depending on where you come from, you already have it there, but they serve those 2 terms to help establish, and then going forward, you make sure that those terms are met.
Okay. So with that, hold on, please. Hold on with that. I do want to make sure we recognize a couple of the hands that I had before we get to you, Mr. Stonecipher. So I appreciate you speaking, but I want to get Miss Ayana, and then we'll come to you if you don't mind. Thank you.
So my question is, if the inaugural body is serving 6 years, how would the rest of the language go in terms of moving forward? So in other words, you wouldn't be clearing house for the first 6 people that are having 6 years. What would happen after that? What would that language look like?
May I make an attempt, if I may? I would think that it would say members of the commission shall be appointed for a term of office of, I think we mentioned 5 years. Let me just say 5 years. 5 years, or until a successor is appointed and confirmed. And then thereafter, all terms shall be for a period of 3 years. Does that make sense?
But I guess the question I'm asking you is, if you've got 11 people or 13, whichever the case is that clearing house for, everybody starts off at the same place, and after 5 years or 6 years, what happens when everyone's term is up after the 5 or 6 years?
Well, that's where what we're discussing, because as you can, if you look in that, that's where the staggering comes into play, and also where they would be replaced with that successor. So the question is being asked right now, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Kinney, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Stonecipher, is the amending 4A for the last sentence after what is already written to be, and the either how we word it as far as the establishing members of this commission will have the initial 2 terms. Is that a way to word that?
Yes, essentially, I mean, you do not have to have staggered terms. It's just whether you want it or not, we can figure that out. But if you could have it where they serve 5 years for the initial term, and then thereafter, all terms will be for a period of 3 years, or 6 years, and then 3 years.
But what I guess the question I'm asking, if that's the case, then you're cleaning house after everyone has done their 5 years.
Only if it's 2
Not
terms.
necessarily.
If
Not necessarily, because I want you all to keep in mind as well. And then I'm going to have Mr. Stonecipher speak.
Yes.
That we, as council members, still have discretion if we want to keep those folks in those positions. So, or ask for their resignation, or whatever the case may be. So I want you to also keep that in mind. Even with us staggering this, there's still a possibility and ability for that council member to replace whoever that person may be.
Or, as you said, or keep them on for longer.
Either one. Whether
yeah, I don't like that.
Well, this is where we can have the discussion, Mr. Stonecipher.
Thank you. I agree with Ayana that we've got to have some continuity and leadership. And if we have everybody leave after the first 6 years, we're starting all over. And that is a huge mistake. So we have to have staggered terms.
Can I just propose that we
Hold
say,
on 1 second, please, Bruce. I want to talk to let Ms. Rabbi Harris speak.
Thank you. I guess I just want to put in a plug for keeping it as it is, frankly, with the opportunity at council members' discretion to ask people to serve 2 consecutive terms, to leave. That addresses the issue of everybody leaving at once, and it also, because people wouldn't necessarily, but also we're taking for granted the idea that everybody who makes the commitment, first of all, can make a 6-year commitment and would be good for a 6-year commitment. All of that makes me nervous. I'm very comfortable with how it's currently written.
Thank you, Rabbi. Ms. Ayana?
The problem I have with that, Councilwoman, is this. For example, you were talking earlier about, trying to get things passed and that kind of thing. And we know that there are issues around getting things passed, and there being some type of everyone playing on one ball team, I guess you could say. So if you've got people that are not big on the Human Rights Commission, period, and they've got someone on, decide to keep that person on for another 6 years, another 5 years, we may not get too much done. Is what I'm looking at that particular scenario. If you've got people that are pro Human Rights Commission and they have put some people on there that are really committed to the process, then you're going to have a lot more, I think, a bigger success rate in terms of accomplishing what the commission is being really developed to do.
Yes, ma'am. I do want you, all of us, to realize we did make a motion to change those terms already, and it failed. So
I know
we are here, and I also want you to keep in mind, as we have suggested, this body has suggested to stagger. That's also how our city council elections are the process of our city council elections. They are staggered the same way. So I do want us to keep those things in mind as well. I have 8:06, y'all, and we are 6 minutes over where I wanted to be. So, Mr. Bruce.
Just my last proposal is that we just make the founding members' term, their first term, 4 years, and then we continue on with the 2 3-year stagger. So two years for odd, 2 years for 3 years for even number boards, 2 years for odd. And so that way we've got that first 4 years, and then you can serve a second term. You're not obligated to do a second term, but you can serve a second term, which would give you a total of 6 or 7 years total. And then you will have your 3-year cooling off, or your 3-year cooling off period. So I think that is the best I can offer.
Well, I understand that, but I think now we're just getting into semantics, and I think we should probably just stay where we are because those motions have previously failed. If you continuously look at what this is, it says that we will have staggering. You have the time frame of 5 to 6 years. Life is going to happen for some of us where, as Rabbi said and suggested, some people will probably not want to continue through that process. Some may. We will also add in this resolution, which I've asked Mr. Kinney to help me with, to make sure and ensure that we establish a subcommittee of all of us from this body that want to continuously stay engaged with the legislative and advocacy subcommittee for us to continue to work through the things that we know need to and can be done to help strengthen the task as far as the commission, I keep saying task force, but the commission and what their powers and abilities can be. So please keep those things in mind as well. So we're working on ways to continuously strengthen this body as far as us taking it to the council for that approval. So those are the things we will move forward with pertaining to how we will move forward with this. So are there any other questions or any other concerns? What I'd like to do is for us to I'm thinking we'll take a vote on this, but I really hate to continue to prolong this. If people want to continue to make some suggestions, we can do this for 2 weeks, come back in 2 weeks and work through the other pieces. But I want you all to keep in mind, we're going to have 2 hours and we're going to get this work done in the next 2 hours because we don't want to prolong this effort of us getting this in front of the council members and for us to continue to work through the process of establishing this commission, getting the people that we know want to be engaged in this commission. And again, that legislative and advocacy work that needs to be done because our city council has that legislative committee that we need to get things on their agenda for them to help us strengthen this body. So keep those things in mind. We can reconvene this in 2 weeks if you all are comfortable with that. And I would suggest that you all read through this again with a fine-tooth comb. And we come back. If you have email questions, please email the folks that can help us in this work as far as our municipal counselors who are here and ready to serve. And we appreciate them for going back and forth with us for this work. But please, let's look at this again. And if you have any questions, even of the legislative and policy group, the members that are available would be more than happy to discuss where the concerns were and why we reached the point. And Dr. B, if you don't mind, if you'll send that where we voted as far as the terms and all of those things. I think Ms. Jane may still have it. If you still have it, if you can grab it and send it to Ms. Jane, and let's send that back out again for us to remember and recall all of the things that we voted upon for us to get to this area where we are right now, as far as what you have seen that is in writing for this body to consider. Okay. I'm going to close. I know Miss Ayana, I'll have to call you on the phone, but
no. I wanted to agree with you and say, rather than rush through it, people review all the documents and come back in 2 weeks, and there may be some clarity in that time frame.
Okay, so we'll call this meeting to order. Let me look on the calendar here.
Hey, Nikki,
Yes.
Can I just say one thing? I want to thank Rita and Kenny for an excellent presentation tonight. They did a great job.
Yes, I think I've already said that, but I appreciate you reiterating that. What we'll do here, we'll look at this in 2 weeks. What is today? Today is the 9th. I believe the next Thursday Is it, it's either I have the 23rd, is that correct?
23rd.
The 23rd at 6 p.m. We will reconvene this meeting. Is everyone okay with the 23rd at 6 p.m.? Raise your hands if you are okay with the 23rd at 6 p.m.
And would that be enough, Councilwoman Nice, enough time for the legal team to make amendments that were approved tonight and then resend out the new document with those changes?
Yeah.
Mr. Kinney?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's plenty of time.
Okay.
We'll put the new changes in red line for you. We'll go ahead and accept the red lines in the current draft and then make the changes you made, and they'll be in red line the next time.
Okay, wonderful, thank
Okay.
you.
And
Thank you.
Out to everybody, because I hadn't seen anything until this got sent out 2 weeks ago.
Well, nothing had been sent out prior to.
Here, I was making sure that I'm getting everything that's getting out.
I promise you, you have not missed anything.
Okay.
yes, and you might,
Because you're on my list. You're on the priority list. Make sure it gets to David. Make sure it gets to Bruce.
I'm sure that's the list I'm on.
and you might look over the state legislative priorities that we've drafted for next time.
Yes, because we will go through that, and I want you all to look at that and prioritize for yourselves what you think would be the most important. We have done that as far as our legislative and policy subcommittee. We've done that, and we can discuss that in 2 weeks as well. All right.
Yeah, I can tell James getting nervous about that, so hopefully we can vote on that in 2 weeks.
Okay. I'm going to skip to the agenda, and we will defer items 4 and 5 for our September 23rd meeting at 6 p.m. Are there any, and move to item 6. I'm going to say we have heard from all of our members today. Are there any public comments? Item 7. Any comments from the public? Ms. Jane, did anyone sign up to speak?
Nope.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to move forward with item 8, which is the adjournment. Before we do that, Dr. Benjamin or Mariana Adams, would you have anything to say?
Nope.
Okay, thank you, ladies. With that being said, please, everyone, you get back some of your evening. We took an extra 15 minutes. Thank you for that. Please enjoy your evening and look over these documents because you will be quizzed in 2 weeks. No, I'm just kidding. See y'all later. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Okay, talk to you later.
Bye-bye. Thank you.